panel on mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So by now, you should already have been to several other panels, so you should be familiar with the breakdown of how this session will run. I will give a brief introduction of our panelists. Then for 40 or 45 minutes, we'll have a moderated discussion about mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex. And then we'll save the last 15 or 20 minutes for Q&A from you, the audience. While I would love to get to everyone, do keep in mind that sometimes time constraints do not allow that. So my name is Mary Goodwin Okendo, and I am an attorney, disability civil rights, but civil rights nonetheless. And I am a former executive board member of the New York Urban League. I sat on the Civics and Economics Committee, and I'm very happy to be here for the 7th annual State of Young Black New York. It's an excellent program, and I hope that you will leave here today not just feeling like you're schmoozing with a bunch of other young black people, but that you actually have been equipped with knowledge and tools so that you can act and encourage other people to act. So, starting over here, on this end, we have Mr. Kenneth Willis, Esquire. He is a criminal defense and civil rights attorney. He is a passionate criminal defense and civil rights attorney representing the poor and disenfranchised. Whether it was in New Orleans or New York City, Kenneth had a purpose to fulfill for those who were not as fortunate as the young boy from the Deep South. Next to him, we have Stephanie Willis, Esquire. She is a music and entertainment attorney. Stephanie is a first-generation Haitian American born and raised in New York. After graduating from the Law Center in 2008, Stephanie was admitted to the Louisiana Bar and was hired as a judicial clerk by the Honorable Angelique A. Reed. Upon completion of her clerkship, Stephanie furthered her legal career as an ADA for the parish of Orleans in New Orleans, Louisiana. Next, we have Mr. Kevin Livingston. He is founder and president of 100 Suits for 100 Men. Kevin Livingston is the founder and president of this organization, which was established in 2011. The organization's mission is to reduce prison recidivism rates and repeat offenses in convicted felons through gainful employment and reentry services. And our fourth panelist that we have here is Angelo? Yes. Angelo Pinto. He is senior attorney for the Advancement Project. Angelo Pinto joined Advancement Project in 2016 to work on the schoolhouse to jailhouse track program, as well as our Emerging Justice Project, as his Emerging Justice Project. He has over 10 years of experience working with youth justice and criminal justice arenas, working directly with the system-impacted youth, conducting research and leading legislative reform. He brings a unique skill set and commitment to liberation. So before we get into the meat of everything, I'd like to get a better sense of how many of you have been impacted by our criminal justice system. So please raise your hand if you feel comfortable, whether you have personally ever been charged with a crime. Family members. Hands down. Friends? Oh, hands down. Do you know anyone that's in jail? All right, so that's everyone. And you know, of the industrialized nations in the world, the United States has the highest incarceration rate, which is weird considering we're supposed to have the most freedoms for our citizens. So, can someone tell us, what is the prison industrial complex? Some say that we have more black people in jail now than were ever enslaved in the United States. So, what does that mean?
Okay, I guess I'll go first because they always say ladies first. So I'm just so thankful to be here with all of you today, and it's, you know, I just want to say thank you for having me be a part of this panel. And you know, to get to your question, the prison industrial complex is it's a really complex situation, as we all know. When dealing with mass incarceration, I want to say a lot of people just started it's not true. Not a lot of people just began talking about it, but it received a lot of publication because of Michelle Alexander's book and because of the recent documentary by Ava DuVernay. But this has been happening for a long time. We currently have more individuals in prison now than we did in 1850 when that was 10 years before the Civil War. Like in 2004, there were more black men that were denied the right to vote because of the fact that they were incarcerated than there were slaves at that time. So, I mean, this is something that has been going on for a while, and it's something that it's really downtrodden on the backs of our people. So, I think it's a complex question that I'm trying to, I guess, answer in a more general manner, but there's so much that actually goes into it. I don't know if you agree with me.
I agree. I mean, for us to only make up 13% of the population and represent 80% of the people who live in these facilities, and I know firsthand, I'm on Rikers Island 3 times a week where we run our academies in the GMDC building. And all I see is our black and Latino brothers, right? And so it is very complex. But I have a different take on how to kind of break the school to prison pipeline, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
Well, Stephanie touched on it, and some questions was asked earlier. By the way, I'm Kenneth Willis. I'm delighted to be here. Look forward to meeting you guys, and I think I know you.
It's my husband.
So, what I've realized, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I've been practicing law for about 9 years. And I'm in the courtroom every day. I'm in the prison every day. I see this every day, and I see kind of what you see, but even more, right? And when we look at the prison system, the industrial complex, we look at it and we say, certainly there's some inherent bias, right? Certainly there is either a conscious or unconscious bias going on that's been playing out for over time. And then Michelle Alexander writes this book, right? And she says that she was influenced by other people, some radicals, but at that point she didn't really take that into mind. But I read the book and I began to realize what they were saying, and I said, wait, I thought I knew about this. But turns out I did not know that this was a totally different beast, right? I've learned when I started practicing law, you are innocent until proven black, brown, or broke. And a lot of times if you black and you brown, more than likely you broke in the criminal system. So, and I don't want to take up all the time, but with the new Jim Crow, we're connecting some dots. Stephanie talked about it. We went all the way back to slavery, and we talked about how the slaves got their emancipation. And then, so now there's the end of the Civil War, it's the Reconstruction era, and now the Southern whites are saying, where do we go from here? How do we rebuild our system? How do we rebuild our economy? What do we do? And they're looking to all the 400 former slaves and saying, what do we do now? And then there was a loophole. Y'all heard about it if y'all watched the documentary. There was a loophole. Yes, everyone's free. But if you are a criminal, you are still considered a slave. And we're going to touch on how history never was eradicated, but systems were replaced and replicated throughout the years. You look at slavery, you look at the segregation era, you look at the civil rights era, you look at Nixon, you look at the Reagan administration,
even the Clinton administration,
the war on drugs, right? First it was war on crime, demonizing our blacks, you know, describing them as characters, as colored-faced pariahs. We heard a lot about that back in the 70s. You know what was interesting? Nixon was saying, when he was talking about trying to get all the white Southerners who were poor and the blacks and the poor whites, they wasn't all poor, they was working class. They had something in common. They had a common plight, right? And they was galvanizing, known as the Populists, right? The People's Party. And the white elites saw that they were threatened. It was threatened. And they said, listen, if we let these blacks and these whites, poor whites, working class whites, these elites was bankers, owned the railroad, owned plantations, if we let them galvanize, we're gonna lose political power. So we can't let them get together. We gotta separate them. And that's when it all started, where there was this racial caste, where we're white, we're supreme, we're superior, and the blacks are inferior. And then the whites conveyed to the working class, you don't understand, you have a badge of superiority. Don't group with them, come with us. And that's how the working class whites came with the elites, Southern elites. Then we saw that in the history where it's called the Southern Strategy. Nixon, we think about it all the time. A lot of individuals who have the same plight as some of the Democrats, why are they fighting in the Republican Party? They're poor. They need jobs.
You raised many excellent.
I'm sorry. I get fired up about this.
You kept dropping gems. You kept dropping gems. Now, so what we've described here is an intentional system. A system that was meant to disenfranchise people and keep them down. So just thinking broadly, it's not just the individuals who themselves are incarcerated and convicted that are affected. It's their family members, it's communities. We have whole communities, even in New York City alone, where almost every family has at least one person that is incarcerated. We have people who are then kicked out of their homes because someone is incarcerated. And something else that isn't really thought about when we think of how this system works to weaken the power of people is most of these cases, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen, it's not my area of practice, but my limited experience with criminal defense, is that even those people who don't end up going to jail, having to keep going back to court over and over and over again. There's no such thing as a speedy trial, not for black people. And they keep you coming back, prosecution is not ready, people are losing their jobs, right? Especially if it's a juvenile, their parents are coming. If it's a breadwinner, sometimes if you have a pending charge, you just let go automatically. And these are all tools that are used to hurt communities of color. So now that we know that, what can we do? What can we do?
I mean, I think in a little bit to the first question, a friend of mine, in one of his performances, he said slavery never got abolished, it just got polished. Right? So when you think about the prison industrial complex, that's a good starting point to think about. Like, this is an extension of slavery, or as folks like to say, it's another mechanism of social control, right, based on race. It's a mechanism of social control based on race. It's about prisons and or jail. It's an industry, which means it's a business, a big business, just like slavery was a big business.
A private business.
Yeah, well, they're not always private, but it's sometimes private, but slavery was the business that drove and made America the superpower. And it's complex, right? It's very complex when you start to get to the nitty-gritty of it and the number of systems that the prison industrial complex is connected to, right? It's a tremendous amount of systems. And then, of course, as folks mentioned, Michelle Alexander pointed out, the new Jim Crow, and the war on drugs, which was really just a war on black folks, right? And really, when you look at it deeper, the way I've started to realize it more, is really a war on children, right? In New York State, most recently, I worked on a campaign before I came to my new job called Raise the Age. I don't know if folks are familiar with that issue. New York State was one of 2 states that automatically prosecute 16 and 17-year-olds as adults for any crime. They were automatically housed in adult jails and prisons. Maybe a month ago, we got that practice to end in New York State. But what you saw was these 16 and 17-year-olds, every year, it was at its height, it was about 55,000 were arrested every year. 55,000. So these young, and in New York State's prison population is a little bit under 50,000. So what you saw was these are the young people who spend their life cycling in and out of the system, right? And New York State, if you look at it, is very much an example of what's happening throughout the rest of the state. But another way to look at the money, which is very important, there's an article that came out a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, called $1 Million Blocks. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Basically what the article said is, over 75% of the folks incarcerated in New York State come from New York City. Over 75% of the folks incarcerated in the state come from New York City, and the vast majority of those folks come from 6 or 7 neighborhoods. Your Bedford-Stuyvesants, your East New Yorks, your Harlems, your South Jamaica, Queens. Now, one of the other important pieces of the article was, it was called $1 Million Blocks because it said the state is spending over $1 million on some of these blocks just to incarcerate folks on one block. Wow. Right? Now, the article showed there was over $100 million blocks in the city of New York. Some of these blocks were $30 million blocks, right? So the amount of money being spent to incarcerate folks just from New York City is a tremendous amount of money. This is important because New York State is not one of the states that has a lot of private-run prisons. It's state-run prisons. But this is basically an economic strategy, a job strategy for rural New York, because that's where all the prisons are, upstate. So this is jobs, and it's the same thing you saw before. So you see black and brown folks going upstate to be incarcerated to provide jobs for other people. Right?
So you make an excellent point about there being a cycle. Kevin, I know that you do some work to prevent people from going in and out. Can we discuss some of the circumstances surrounding that pattern and also what you and other organizations are doing to curtail that?
Well, I can speak for me. We have three offices. One is in parole. We have a male boutique in parole. So when men are coming home from incarceration, we have a big office space, and then we have big flowers, and we have suits. They get free haircuts, shoe shining sessions, and most importantly, they get a mentoring talk for one of my staff members. And that's probably the most crucial part of this component, because men actually get down to talk to other men to express whatever is on their mind, right? I recently partnered with Manhattan Clerk Tingland, one of the top judges in New York City, to go and register young men and women on Rikers Island to vote, right? And we're also working on a certificate of relief for the parole population who are getting ready to age out of parole. I'm really big on the school to prison pipeline. And when I, like on Wednesday, I'm bringing over 40 books, soft covered. If you want to help join, let me know. But the books the young men are asking for are the Wall Street Journal, 48 Laws of Power, or whatever it is, The Art of Seduction. It's after our initial talk. When I first met them, they were all gang members and they didn't want to talk. I went to the Crip house, I went to the Blood house, I went to the most violent house, which is the Dropout house, because that house is, you don't know who's beefing with who. They can't go back to their housing unit because they're going to get cut, so they're all in the same room. And I'm in there by myself with about 13 other men. They cap it at 13 to be in the day room. Now this is what happens in these rooms. They have them in 2 tables like this, and they stay in there for about 9 hours a day. So it's just 2 TVs pasted on the wall, and an old PlayStation 1 actually. I'm serious. And that's all they do all day, right? And so we started dialect, and I'm teaching these young people how to do financial literacy. A lot of people, over 70% of people at Rikers Island are not charged, right? So it's not over, right? We want to convey that message to them. I'll tell you the first time I went to Rikers, and I want to hear from other parents, I'm going to cut it right there. The first time I went to Rikers, I was going there to teach them how to tie ties. I was excited. I brought ties and everything else, but I was stopped. He says, we can't do that. What you need to do is go in there and tell them how to become state ready. How do you go in there and tell young men how to become state ready? So when I went into the housing unit, 13 out of the 13 young men, 9 of them were charged with attempted murder. 9. Right? And so I had to shift quickly. Right? It was nerve-wracking to me because I never taught somebody how to become, I've never been to upstate. Right. I've barely been to Niagara Falls, right? So like, how do I tell them? And I couldn't do it. So I had, the whole conversation shifted and it changed. We started talking about what books they want. And we started talking about what's their mentality, what they do, start talking about their passion. We have to give them something to look forward to. Because what's gonna happen is they're gonna come home, go right back into the same cycle, and I swear to God, I'm gonna shut up after this. This happened yesterday, because you had said something about employment. I had a brother, 15 years in prison, came home about a month ago, and he came to the whole boutique. I had an opportunity for him to be custodian at Senior Center. Now, he was charged with manslaughter, and what happened, she had the interview with him. She asked him what was his conviction before the interview started. Now, you all know that's illegal in New York City, right? He didn't tell me that. So when he came out of the interview, he was really depressed, worried, shaken, really, honestly, 15 years in prison. But he was like, Kev, I really want the position, but she asked me. I said, hear her out. She said, I'll get back to you in 72 hours. Well, three weeks later, she never got back to me. So I called. I said, how you doing? What's going on? What happened with this employee? Well, we're not going to move forward with him. And I said, well, okay. Well, let me ask you this question. When you had the interview, did you ever ask him about what's his card? Well, he signed the papers, whatever have you. I went a step further and pulled the video. And I found out that she sent them outside to fill out paperwork after she brought them in. So now she has her job on the line. Your question was, what can we do? Follow up. Weed out those companies that are not doing right by these men who are coming home to do the right thing. I'm all about breaking that school to prison pipeline, right? Because now I'm doing damage control because I'm trying to keep him encouraged. So he won't go back out there and commit and go right back up top. And he called me today and told me, Kev, thank you so much. I see what you're doing for me. And now he's encouraged to go do the right thing. Follow up. That's huge. And that's how I start breaking that's the way I start breaking the school prison pipeline.
I just want to say, people say it's not the school, it's the cradle to prison pipeline. Right? It's from the time you're born, wherever you're born, in many cases, that you're set up to go to prison.
Can you describe some of those factors?
I mean, I think if you look at the $1 Million Blocks article, it says certain neighborhoods, they just have a higher propensity for incarceration. And it's because if you look in New York City, you have policies like stop and frisk. So there are police practices that target certain communities over policing. That's what happens. And now stop and frisk essentially is against the law. But now if there's a whole new thing that's happening in New York State, raids. If you look at the Bronx, Harlem, and Brooklyn, that's what's happening now. There's a whole website about a raids in New York. So so the police department says the stop and frisk numbers are down, but what they're doing is they're going into housing projects and rounding up 100 kids at one time. And everyone is going to be charged with the most serious offense that anyone commits. Because they're all going to be charged with conspiracy.
Of course. I would completely agree with you there. But, to go back to your question, and just to follow up with what he said real quick, they are charging the most highest crimes that they possibly can. As a former prosecutor, that is your job. You want to, and that's one of the parts of my job as a former prosecutor that used to kill me every day when I went into court, okay? I'm going into court in New Orleans, predominantly black city, and I remember the first felony drug case that I had. It was an individual, he may have been in his late 40s, early 50s, right? And he was a habitual offender. And when they mean by habitual offender, it's somebody who has prior convictions. And a lot of the times when, and excuse me for saying this word, but they say habitual offenders, it's a BITCH, because it literally it is. Because once you are a convicted felon, once you come back into court again, you know, you have that 3 strikes rule. Yeah. And so once you're there, you come back that 3rd time, that's it. And so I digress, but to get back to my story, I remember sitting at a table. I'm the prosecutor in this case, and I see his family sitting right there, and he decided to take a plea. And because if we had gone to court, and we had a great deal of evidence against him, but if we had gone to trial, he was looking at a longer sentence. And so he decided to take the plea deal. And as they were taking him to the back, his daughter comes up to me and she looks at me and she says, "This is all your fault. This is all your fault." And I'm here, I'm the only black woman in that courtroom. My co-counsel is white, but she came to me and she said, "This is all your fault. You could have done something about this." And at the time, it broke me, but she's right. One of the ways that we can do more is, it sounds crazy, but this system is not going anywhere. So in the meanwhile, we need to have more of us in there, because without us, there's no way that we're gonna break the system. Because if I were the one who had read the gist or read the police report, okay, and I was able to see, okay, maybe we can do something else. Maybe we can get him into some sort of a program. Maybe we can, what's the cause? What's the reason why he decides that he needs to sell drugs for a living, or he needs to do whatever it is? If we can get to that cause, then we can stop individuals from returning back into the system. There's a 70% recidivism rate. That's extremely high. LeBron James had this hashtag on Instagram maybe like a few months ago that said, "We need more." And it's absolutely true. We need more of us in those types of positions to stop the process.
I was gonna say, I hear that. I don't know if that gets it done. Like in New York, if you look at the police department in New York City, and I helped found an organization called Justice League NYC, and we work with a group of officers called the NYPD 12, who are officers who are blowing the whistle on illegal practices within the department. And I have a conversation with some of them, and they're like, we need more officers of color. And I'm like, well, there is. And the department is wreaking havoc and doing all types of crazy stuff. If you look at Rikers Island, most of the correction officers are black and brown. So I don't know if that gets it done. I mean, the only thing the other last thing I'll say is, Tupac has this quote where he says, "We ain't meant to survive because it's a setup." Yeah. And the system is set up in such a way, even when, and I have a ton of friends that are lawyers now from going to law school, even when you're working in the system now, it's like one person cannot disrupt the system. I say it to folks all the time, an organization can't disrupt the system. It takes a system to disrupt the system, and we haven't built a system, and I don't think we're in a position to win. And even small wins, to be honest. I mean, even with you talk about police killings around the country, 9 out of 10 times these guys don't even get indicted, let alone convicted, let alone spend jail time. So we're just not in a position right now, from my perspective, to win. Even though there is a lot of attention around and visibility to this issue of mass incarceration, we're just not in a position to win.
I can't really say that though. Yeah. I can't really say that. I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree.
I'm just gonna chime in on that.
Let it go.
I think that both of you are right. We have to work within the system so that we have the knowledge on how to break it.
But I feel like that's what we've been doing. There's 150 years of evidence that show that doesn't work.
But I'm not saying you don't. But it's how you break it. I don't think you break it by being an attorney, because I know myself and other attorneys, like, you probably feel helpless sometimes because you see how things are going on and you're like, but I'm powerless. At the end of the day, it goes down to the laws, right? We are only enforcing the laws that exist. The mandatory minimums, the actual criminal offenses, if people wanted, we could have laws being very clear about when an officer should be indicted. It's
White
like the
folks don't
laws
get
are
white folks don't get arrested for doing the same exact things black folks.
Agreed.
So it's
And
not the law.
I totally
It's not
agree
the
with you
laws,
there.
then. It's not
But
the
here's
laws.
the thing, though. It is the laws, though.
It's
It
who
is the
gets to
laws
enforce the law.
because if
On who?
you. But here's the thing, though. If you have individuals who are in the legislature, who are there, who are, essentially giving what the law is, you have more of us in there, then that can do some sort of a change.
And I understand what you're saying too about.
And that's why it's, I'm sorry, but that's why I'm so incredibly hyped with Judge Tingland going on this massive voter registration and education for young people in these correctional facilities. Because more often, when we get out there and vote in masses, because it begins with us,
Right.
we can then affect legislation. Legislation can affect laws, and then we can reverse that cycle.
Just, I
that
just
you're
want to say real
talking
quick, again, we ain't meant to survive because it's a setup. Tupac said that, right? Felon disenfranchisement. If you have a felony, often you can't vote. Florida has almost 2 million people who can't vote because of felonies.
Well,
Virginia,
let me say this.
I'm just saying that to say that there's a system in place that even though we're in this race to address mass incarceration, they had a 150-year head start. Right? So the idea that you can beat them in a system that's set up just to protect them, and that's the other thing that I realize for black folks. We believe fairness is going to happen.
No.
And I'm just saying, when you say we're going to reform the system,
Because,
you're saying the system can be trusted. I'm saying you cannot do
But
that.
you can't change it, though.
But this is let me get a little 2 cents in.
Yes,
Just a little
yes,
2
yes.
cents. When Stephanie said that we can change this or do some type of effect, may not be something revolutionary, but one prosecutor at a time. We really need to stress on how important a prosecutor's role in the case. Prosecutors got more power than judges.
Yeah.
They see the case before it gets to the judge. They are able to exercise discretion. Now, we got this new attorney general, somebody from Alabama who cultivated his career on tough on crime by the name of Jeffrey Sessions. And soon as Trump gets in office, he sends out a memo to all the prosecutors in this country and say, you know what, we're going to go back to this tough on crime. We're going to charge them to the highest, completely dismantle what Obama's administration did, where they say, you know what, we're going to use our discretion. So what you think some of those prosecutors could do? Now, this is not a mandate, this is a memo. If we have some black and brown attorneys in office, prosecutors, being able to look at the file and use their what? Discretion. Despite this memo that this guy from Alabama, right? We want to talk about the new Jim Crow. This guy's from Alabama and he's in office as the Attorney General of the United States. And he's bringing back this tough on crime, war on crime, all this talk that got people thinking that there's a lot of violence going on. Trump gets on the stage and say, they raping our women. They killing our, don't that sound familiar? That sounds like what they were saying after slavery and Jim Crow. The same old stuff. So when we're talking about replacing, replicate, Angelo said it wasn't abolished, it was polished. We're seeing the same institutions that's furthered, that's fueled by racism, classism, repression. But at least start with a prosecutor. At least that's a little step closer. It may not change everything.
And one second. One key word that you kept saying was discretion, and I think that's the biggest problem. Because while we may wait for more of us to get in there to exercise this discretion, we still have this issue. And that's why I say the laws, because discretion is only a tool when the law isn't clearly spelled out. You know what I mean? So those things have to be more intentional. And it's not going to be overnight, I don't think.
They'll always have discretion. Always.
But we'll have more tools to counteract that. If the law says they have the discretion to do X, Y, and Z, and they exercise that, then you're out of luck. But if the law says you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z.
This is the thing. And I mean, I always believe you got to do both and, right? You have to give black folks in those positions. I completely agree. I just don't think it's going to be sufficient ever. So I just want to be clear about that. That's my perspective. Okay. And that's my perspective. And I mean, I went to law school because I thought it was important. I'm just also recognizing the fact that I do not think it's sufficient. Ken Thompson was a black attorney in Brooklyn. He was dealing with the officer who was charged with murdering a Kai Gurley. Right? The guy didn't do no time. Ken Thompson, black folks got Ken Thompson in that position because we said we're going to get a black prosecutor who's going to do what we want him to do. He had the opportunity to prosecute and send this guy to jail, this police officer, and he did not. He gave him probation. I don't know no black person who gets probation for killing somebody. I just want to say that. Now, we're dealing with Jeff Sessions in the federal government, right? One of the most powerful men in the country right now. When we had Loretta Lynch, right? When we had other black folks, when you talk about a couple years ago, right? We had a complete 180. They were not implementing policies that were radically going to transform the circumstances for black folks. You had consent decrees happening around this country that would say, we're going to look at the pattern and practices of police departments where there's egregious things happening. Just the consent decree. Consent decree doesn't do a damn thing. I just want y'all to know. Didn't do a damn thing. And now even Jeff Sessions is saying, we're not even going to look at them anymore. So when we did have black folks in positions of power, black folks who, of course, on paper, and I think in real time, are much better than a Jeff Sessions, we did not make the kind of progress that we need to make as a people, right? And that's just the reality, that's the fact of the matter. Now, yeah, I just want to say that.
That's a good point. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions. Yes?
So for Pinto, my question is, do you have a resolution? What do you, in your opinion, feel like needs to happen, since you don't feel like it's that we need more of us in office? What do you feel like, what can we do since we're behind the race?
I think that's part of the strategy. I feel like a strategy to address mass incarceration has to be much more comprehensive than what it is right now. There's a couple of folks talking about this idea of cutting the prison population by 50 in the next 20 years. Glenn Martin at Just Leadership, who's running the Close Rikers campaign, and de Blasio said they're going to close it in 10 years. That's going to matter to anybody then. He won't even be in a position to do it, right? And then Van Jones is talking about it on the national level. There are not, states do not have comprehensive plans to address legislatively even to pull things back. So for instance, New York State, I was the campaign manager for this Raise the Age thing. They say it's the most progressive criminal justice reform since the Rockefeller drug reform. It's the tip of the iceberg. It was huge, but we didn't do nothing. For real. When you look at the numbers. We talk about, like on Rikers Island, you can't close Rikers Island unless you have comprehensive bail reform and speedy trial. You can't do it. As the brother said, there's people, they're on Rikers, none of them get convicted of nothing. Unless you're down on appeal. That's to teach legal research. Unless you're down on appeal. They haven't been convicted of a damn thing. Right? You're talking about between 13 to 18,000 people. Right? That's the reality. And you're talking about kids, too. My mother works with girls on Rikers Island. You're talking about kids, 17, 18-year-old girls. You're talking about children growing up in jail and prison. Right? How are you not going to recidivate? So part of what has to happen is, the first thing is, we have to realize that the system is not meant to serve us. We gotta get that in our mind. Like, the system's not meant to serve us. If it has the opportunity, it will destroy you. That's what it's going to do. Now, we can have a plan to say, listen, we have to build an alternative system that confronts this system from policing all the way to reentry, right? When folks have to come home. You have to have a system that goes from policing all the way to reentry. And then on top of that, black folks have to create community and a way of life that keeps black children safe from this thing. And we ain't talking about that. And some folks are, I don't want to say that. All we're talking about primarily is confronting the system that's killing us. So basically, like we have an ineffective shield. Someone's coming at you with the gun blazing or the sword swinging, and your shield is broke. That's what we got. And we ain't got no gun or nothing. That's the situation we're in. So we have to really transform how we look at these things. And the other pieces, for the vast majority of folks, we don't even see it as a big issue. It's visible with Michelle Alexander and 13. Most folks don't know anything about that. They ain't talking about that. They ain't talking about Real Housewives or whoever. I mean, that's the reality.
Side chicks now.
So we, as a people too, are, you know, this, I'd say that we're gonna move into generation woke. I believe that for the babies, because of just the circumstances we live under with Trump. And I hope that that creates an atmosphere for us that we decide, that we realize we gotta move differently in this country. Otherwise, we're gonna, the same thing's gonna keep getting worse.
Thank you. I felt like that was the answer I was looking for, and I wanted you to say it. I felt like it was there, and I wanted you to say it. So thank you. And you were still censored with that. I can tell. So.
Definitely.
And also, you know, it's up to us to put pressure on your state officials in terms of bail reform. We have way too many people sitting in these facilities who can't make a minimum bail to come out, so they sit in these things for months on end. Now think about it, you have a high school person or a young person who never had any involvement in the criminal justice system, and when you go in there, it's gladiator school. If you don't know who it is, seriously, right? And so, how many people have been incarcerated before? I've been to Rikers Island, or been to the boat in the Bronx, you know what I'm saying? And just seeing how you, it changes you. Right? So again, you have somebody who's never been involved, may have been to school, graduated, but made a stupid mistake, but they're sitting in there for 2 or 3 months. It will literally change you because sometimes you're forced to get into a gang, you're assaulted, the guards are assaulted, so their whole mentality is changing. So we have to put pressure on our state legislators to put this issue up on bail reform.
Yes?
Hi, I'm Christine. I'm a social worker, so it's really interesting, like, when we start talking about, like, the recidivism rate, even, like, the mentality as to why they got into this situation. I work with, like, students from foster care who are, you know, trying to kind of go to college, and so it's just really interesting to see, like, their slave mentality, because they're always stuck in that situation. Like, I have students who, like, to them, jail is whatever, like, but they don't see a longer picture. So I guess my statement / question is not necessarily about the whole system, because it starts out with the thought, right? How can we help with that foundation? Because if we can help change the mindset of how people move and operate, then that can begin to transition other pieces of this system so that it can impact the whole system.
I completely agree with you, and I have to commend you because your work is very, very hard, what you do on a day-to-day basis. And really, it starts with you as the social worker. I personally believe that it starts with education. The reason why a lot of the students that you deal with feel the way that they do is because they don't know anything outside of the 4 walls of their home. They don't know anything besides the city block that they're on. They don't know anything besides the corner store that they see. So obtaining some type of education, reallocating funds that are going to the prison system back into our educational system, I think is essentially what will help. For example, this was a while back, but when I was in Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina hit, okay? When Katrina hit, you had a whole bunch of money just coming into the city, right? And I don't know if you guys know or if you guys have ever been to New Orleans, the real New Orleans, that's a tough place to live. It's beautiful, it's culture, but that's an extremely tough place to live. The people there, they're amazing, but I'm gonna just say it's tough. And one of the ways that a lot of individuals thought we could change or like change the mindsets of individuals was through education. But the money that was being filtered into the state went into fixing the Superdome and to fixing the French Quarters, where tourism is, instead of reinvesting that money into the educational system. So what can we do? If you know the state and the federal government are not bringing in money into our homes, into our communities, then it's up to us. You know, and it's unfortunate that a lot of us come from broken homes where, you know, mom is not able to be there all the time for us because she's working 2 and 3 jobs so that she can support you and, you know, hopefully get you out of this mess. You know, so I just think it comes down to us being community. We're not at that stage where we're into helping each other out. We're into how can I get my next? How can I get more social media followers? How can you know who I am? And it's, at the end of the day, it's not about who I am, but who we are. Because they're looking at us collectively, not just as an individual. So it starts with you. That's what I'll say.
And just to say something. Tupac, he had another song called Trap. and because, I mean, when you look at some of his music and other rappers' music, they're really giving you a dissertation of what it is like to be young and black in America. Right? And he had a song called Trap. And in the video, he's being chased by police the whole video long. And that's what the experience for most young black folks in America is. The system is constantly on your heels. Right? It's just like the slave catcher if you left. They was on your heels. That's your experience. Now, jail has and not even just jail, because in New York State, if you go into a housing project, you see a mobile command unit, you see heavy police presence. I tell people now they don't need stop and frisk because they have open air prisons everywhere you live. You don't need jails and prisons anymore. You ain't going to need them. So the reality is the conditions for most folks in their communities, and then when you go to jail and prison, that has become the rites of passage for black and brown folks. So if you're a black boy and George Jackson and Soul of That Brother and Blood in My Eyes explained it perfectly. He talked about his experience as a young man the first time he's involved in criminal activities. Like, you know, someone came to him and said, really, you're just rebelling against a system meant to destroy you. That's what you're really doing. It looks like you're a criminal on the surface, but no. You're rebelling against a system that's really meant to destroy you. Something in you is doing it. That's why kids walk out of school. There's a woman, Grace Lee Boggs, she says, they're voting with their feet. They don't want to be there because it's not for them. And even folks in the education field, they know, they say they're not culturally responsive education. So if you're black, why would you want to be there? Right? The system is meant for you to do certain things, so then the system to say, you're a criminal, you're this, you're that, and lock your ass up. When the reality is, that's all part of the plan. There's a great book called All God's Children. You gotta read it. It's about a guy named Willie Bosket in New York. He's the reason 13, 14, and 15-year-olds are prosecuted as adults. In New York, 13, 14, and 15-year-olds can be prosecuted as adults for certain crimes. Basically, the book, Willie Bosket committed murder on the 2-3 train when he was 15 years old. At this time, 15-year-olds were not prosecuted as adults. So they changed the law with him because they was like, oh, this kid's a monster. This will never happen again. The guy named Fox Butterfield, he's working for the New York Times, they said, I want to know how you get a Willie Bosket. How do you get a 15-year-old committing murder in New York City twice, 2 times in less than a week? Willie Bosket's dad committed murder. His granddad committed murder. But what they followed the family all the way to Edgefield in South Carolina, the most violent county in the most violent state, who was basically run by Irish Scots. Right, who were dueling, right? Exactly. So the culture of violence you see black folks, young black kids engaged in, was a culture of violence they inherited from Europe, right? Right? And now when you connect that with a system of poverty, city poverty, it's exacerbated. You ain't dealing with kids. We didn't create the culture of violence. Just like black kids ain't building no guns. Ain't no gun shop in Bed-Stuy. Everyone knows that's not deep. But these young people are still the ones who, and now people are making millions and billions of dollars off drugs. You're talking about the marijuana industry, and young people still get incarcerated for that. Right? Then that's why I say the laws don't matter if you're black. Right? The laws don't matter if you're black. And I was at the new museum in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to read something to you folks. It was saying in 1860, it was $250 million. That's how much cotton was worth, like the amount of cotton produced in that year, 1860. $250 million. 1860. The value for black folks, enslaved black folks in 1860 was over $3 billion. In 1860. I say that to say, you gotta give people the fucking money. Black folks built this country. And this is the deep thing now. When you look at $1 million blocks and you look at everything else, guess what? You see those numbers? Those are the same numbers for black folks being incarcerated today. America's still making the same money on black folks today. So the cotton industry is not a prison industry. And if you look through the numbers on 1 million black bodies in prison, and that is deep now. Because you're really talking about 13 million on some type of supervised supervision or control. We talk about 2 million incarcerated. That's nothing. You talk about the people on probation, on parole, forget about it. You're talking about maybe a $3, $4, $5, $6 billion industry built on black folks still. But we're not talking about the dollars. Right?
So we are out of
Sorry.
time. Thank you. So we're out of time now. If I could, just because we spoke a lot, if everyone could have 20 seconds to give a takeaway for a call to action. What can we do after we leave here today to address this? 20 seconds.
All right, so look, it's cute that we have a this is mass incarceration, criminal justice. We need to change the conversation. We need to expand it. This is a race issue. This is a human rights issue. The information that we're getting, everybody's starting to get more and more educated. Like Angelo said, nobody cared about this back then, 5, 10 years ago, right? So now this has to get infectious. We need to talk more about it. Spread the word. Talk to your colleagues. Talk to the progressives in this state. And spread the word and change the conversation. Mass incarceration is a human rights issue.
That's a great takeaway. Stephanie?
I just want to, talking about it, talk is cheap to me.
Right
I'm
on.
sorry.
Right on.
You know, talking about it is one thing, it's more so to be about it. And, you know, I understand a lot of us, you know, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, but if you are truly passionate about this issue and truly passionate about our issues as black people, black and brown people, then, you know, you need to do what what the generations before us did. You need to put yourself on the line, because without doing that, nothing's gonna happen. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I Shay, right? So, seriously, our community is our responsibility, right? And that's one of the reasons why I stand for Colin Kaepernick, right? This brother is being blackballed by the NFL. I'm not sure if you saw about him donating suits to parole. That was my company, right? And then we spearheaded a national I Stand for Colin movement in 13 different cities in front of the NFL headquarters. The point is this. We need to stand and take care of our own community. We have to get on the front line and not be afraid to die for the cause. That's right. I say that to anybody. You could watch Pix 11 on Wednesday night. I said that to Mr. G. I'm not afraid to die for my people. I'm not afraid to die for the cause. Don't be afraid, take action, and don't let this be another talking session.
I just want to say that a lot of gratitude, respect, and honor for the panelists, for the work y'all committed to and what you stand for, and everyone in this audience who's here to talk about these things, because if you're here, you care about it. We each have to go home tonight and every night and ask ourselves, what are we going to sacrifice? What are we going to sacrifice? And the other piece is, who else are we going to pull into this? It's not going to happen until a critical mass of us are pulled into this conversation and fighting for it daily.
Thanks. Please give our panelists a round of applause. Now also, make sure that you complete the breakout evaluation. The URL is bit.ly/SOYBNY17digital, and inside a slash, and make sure that you complete the evaluation.
And last thing, give a round of applause to Senator Valmont Montgomery, who just walked in, who for a very long time worked on raise the age legislation and still fights day in, day out for our young people in the criminal justice system. And of course, Yvette Clark, yeah, give her a round of applause.
And I just want to say a special thank you to Angelo Pinto, who really led the fight on Raise the Age in the state of New York.